Mom, you're in charge of Christmas dinner this time around. There'll be 15 folks from Mark's side, and you get how great you are in the kitchen." Sarah's tone came across light and easy on the call, like she was just requesting that Eleanor Vance grab some milk at the market. At 72, Eleanor sensed time halting briefly as her daughter's request sank in. 72 years on Earth, 45 wed to her husband, 30 as a widow, and now this burden. 15 guests, Sarah. "And why am I stuck managing it all?" Eleanor demanded, clutching the receiver so tightly her fingers blanched. From the line's far side, a frustrated exhale escaped Sarah, reminiscent of a petulant kid in a fit. "Come on, Mom, you've got plenty of spare hours. We slave away at our jobs daily. Plus, Mark's place is way too cramped for his whole clan. Yours works ideal, that expansive dining area and roomy cooking space. Truth is, nobody roasts turkey quite like you." Eleanor shut her eyes and pressed back against the kitchen counter. The very spot where she'd whipped up countless dishes for a young Sarah, stayed awake for her late-night teen escapades, and shed quiet tears post her spouse's burial. It seemed her girl had utterly lost sight of their roles, mother and child. "Sarah, darling, I'm not hired help. I'm your mom." "Oh, please, Mom, spare the theatrics. It's merely a holiday meal. Grab the supplies and I'll reimburse you later." Mark chatted with his mother, Brenda, who's handling sweets. "You only handle the entrees, veggies, starters, and tidy up before and after. You know, standard stuff." Standard. A sharp chuckle bubbled up in Eleanor's chest. Since when had servitude to her kin turned routine? When did she start tolerating dismissal of her hours, her vigor, her self-respect? Oh, and Mom, another detail. Mark's relatives have picky tastes in cuisine. Keep it mild, no heat. Aunt Carol avoids gluten. Cousin Matthew sticks to plant-based. Mark's grandmother insists on thoroughly cooked proteins. Also, stock red wine, but nothing pricey since it'll add up. Eleanor stayed quiet, each of Sarah's remarks landing like a sting. This went beyond the feast. It was decades of minor slights piling up into a tempest. The casual mention of 15, as if feeding a crowd of finicky outsiders equaled brewing a quick cuppa. "So what'll you pitch in?" "Sarah, while I slave over your in-laws' spread." "Well, Mom, I'll pitch in, sure. I'll arrange the settings and pour beverages. Mark's occupied with his relatives. Family events like this. You understand." Something snapped within Eleanor's core. Not her spirit, but deeper. Her tolerance. That endless willingness to agree. The drive to embody the flawless parent who avoided friction. For 72 years, she'd been the fixer, the adapter, the smiler amid collapse. "Sarah, let me pose something. When did Mark and his crew last host me? When did they view me as potential grandkids' nana, not gratis maid service?" "Mom, quit that. They value you tons. It's just, you know Mark's reserved nature." Reserved. The same Mark who'd freely tapped her for car repairs. Mark, bold about Eleanor covering meals on their double dates. Mark, unhesitant in crashing her home as a no-cost lodge during his folks' visits. "Fine, Sarah. I see it clearly now." Eleanor's inflection shifted. No more the patient, ever-ready parent. It rang icy, deliberate, transformed. Sarah picked up on it, her voice turning coaxing, slyer. "So that's a yes, Mom. You'll manage it all. I swear it'll make for a lovely holiday with everyone praising your culinary skills." Eleanor gazed through her kitchen pane at the yard she'd nurtured for years, the blooms she'd set when Sarah was small, the weathered seat where she'd swung her now distant granddaughter, who seldom reached out. Her existence had shrunk to mere utility for others. "Sarah, sweetie, I've got an update. Your spouse and his kin are arriving for the holidays. Great. In that case, I'm heading out on vacation, and you handle the group. I'm no nanny, let alone staff." The quiet on Sarah's end thundered. Eleanor pictured her offspring's ashen complexion, gaze bulging in dread at the thought of orchestrating a meal for 15 choosy attendees, solo. "What? Mom, you're joking. A getaway. To where? With who, Mom?" "Mom, this is insane. You've already mapped out every detail. You've arranged it all on your own, Sarah, without even checking if I wanted in on any of it. Eleanor ended the call with shaky fingers and gazed at the handset like it was some alien gadget. After decades, she'd finally uttered a refusal. For the first time ever, she'd drawn a line in the sand. The sensation was as frightening as it was freeing. She moved gradually into the den, where snapshots from her entire existence gazed back from the bookcases. One showed Sarah at age 5, beaming without teeth in her pink polka dot frock amid the yard greenery. Another captured her departed spouse, Robert, dashing and youthful in his army attire, right before reality slammed them with debts, ailments, and letdowns. There were images from Sarah's early holidays when Eleanor figured motherhood alone would bring her joy. How did it all start shifting? When did she cease to be Eleanor, the individual with her personal aspirations and wishes, and turn into just Sarah's parent? She recalled the moment Robert passed 30 years back. Sarah had just turned 15, and Eleanor vowed to serve as both parent figures, ensuring her girl lacked for nothing, and she honored that oath. She pulled extra hours at the plant till her palms grew calloused and her posture curved. She pawned her bridal jewels to fund Sarah's university. She forfeited any chance at romance anew, since Sarah required steadiness. She buried her isolation for 3 decades because her child came first. When Sarah wed Mark 5 years prior, Eleanor imagined she might at last pursue some life of her own, that her grown, settled daughter wouldn't demand so much anymore. What a fool she'd been. The initial request arrived 2 months post-ceremony. "Mom, could you spot us $2,000 for the initial payment on Mark's vehicle? We'll settle up next month." That month never arrived, yet the requests kept piling on. "Mom, mind keeping an eye on the place while we extend our honeymoon in Cancun? Mom, would you put up Mark's folks during their trip? Our spot's way too cramped." And Eleanor invariably agreed, always grinned, always on call. She headed to her sleeping quarters and pulled open the bedside cabinet where she stashed vital papers. Inside sat the ledger tracking household outlays. For years, she'd logged everything precisely, not from suspicion, but from the routine of a laborer who grasped each penny's worth. The figures struck her like a gut blow. Over the past 5 years, she'd shelled out more than $15,000 for Sarah and Mark. That $15,000 drawn from her retirement fund, her accumulated nest egg, the funds earmarked for her health needs in later years. Mark's birthday meal, $100. Sarah's auto fix, $800. Holiday buys for the clan, $950. Tickets for Sarah and Mark to see the relatives, $600. Sarah's housing costs when Mark got laid off, $200 across 3 months. And not a single time had they inquired about her well-being, if she required aid, if she could afford her pills, or to mend the dripping ceiling she'd overlooked for 2 years, since she'd chosen to tackle Sarah's crises first. She perched on the mattress corner and after so long permitted tears to flow. These weren't from sorrow, they stemmed from fury. Fury toward Sarah for presuming too much. Fury at Mark for viewing her as unpaid help around the house, but above all, fury at her own self for permitting it to unfold. The line buzzed once more, Sarah calling back. "Mom, come on, you can't pull this on me. I've already mentioned to Mark you'd handle the meal. He's rounded up his entire crew. What am I supposed to do? I barely know how to prepare for a crowd." "Figure it out," Eleanor responded with a serenity she hadn't realized she held. "Mom, this is nonsense. Ditch that silly getaway. Where do you plan to head solo? With whose cash? Get real. You can't journey by yourself at your age. At her age." As though reaching 72 instantly rendered her helpless, requiring approval for her choices. As if grandmother status meant surrendering womanhood and personal yearnings forever. "Sarah, I've got sufficient funds for the trip. The very funds I've poured into you over the years. What do you mean? We've never hit you up for cash." The falsehood hit so hard Eleanor nearly retched. Had Sarah truly erased all those unrepaid advances from memory, or just dismissed them since they flowed from Mom? Sarah, I've got every receipt, every record. Every dollar I've laid out for you in 5 years is noted. Quiet. Then Sarah's tone, softer, wobblier. Mom, that's not the same. We're kin. Kin support one another. Spot on, darling. Kin support one another. When did you last back me up? Deeper quiet. Eleanor sensed Sarah frantically scanning her mind for any act of kindness toward her mom. She'd come up empty. It never happened. I'm right here for you, Mom. I make it a point to reach out to you all the time. But you only dial me up when there's something you want. That's not the same thing at all. The words lingered between them like a sharp rebuke. Eleanor rose from her seat and moved toward the window, gazing out at the road she'd called home for 4 decades. That very road where she'd brought up Sarah, grieved the loss of Robert, aged gracefully while yearning for the dignity she truly merited. Come morning, I'll be heading to the travel office, she declared at last. You'll need to handle things on your own from here. Sleep eluded Eleanor that evening. She remained wide-eyed, fixed on the ceiling of her bedroom, attuned to the everyday noises of her home. The low buzz from the aging fridge, the steady leak in the bathroom she'd postponed repairing amid endless pressing bills, the gentle groan of seasoned beams, shifting over time. By 3 a.m., she stirred and headed to the kitchen. She prepared a mug of chamomile tea, just like the one she'd once fixed for Sarah during childhood night terrors. How fitting that these days it was Eleanor plagued by bad dreams. Yet hers carried weight in reality, bearing labels like ungratefulness, psychological mistreatment, and the crushing regret of squandering 3 decades as the reliable pillar everyone leaned on but nobody cherished. Perched at the kitchen counter with her warm brew, she started reflecting. Not on the fond recollections she'd nurtured for so long, but the painful ones, tucked away because they stung too deeply. She recalled the initial instance when Sarah had diminished her. It happened 3 years back at the neighbor's baby celebration. Sarah showed up tardy, per usual, and as a guest praised how refined Eleanor appeared in her fresh outfit, Sarah quipped, "Yeah, Mom splurged on some new threads. Fingers crossed she didn't go overboard. You know how seniors get with finances." Seniors, implying that age equaled recklessness, as though her 7 decades of labor and prudent budgeting paled against Sarah's mere 28 years of coasting on handouts. She thought back to Mark's debut meal at her place, right after he began courting Sarah. Eleanor had toiled in the kitchen for hours, roasted chicken with verde sauce, rice infused with saffron, refried beans, fresh corn tortillas, and a trio of homemade salsas. Mark devoured it all without so much as glancing up, no gratitude or praise offered. Finally, he let out a loud belch and muttered, "Not bad. Though my mom, Brenda, spices hers heavier, and Sarah." Her daughter chuckled along with the slight against her own parent. She recalled those holiday gatherings, preparing feasts for 10, 12, even 15 guests from Mark's side, while they lounged in her den, glued to the screen and nitpicking nonstop. The place felt too chilly, the tunes too boisterous, the trimmings too basic, and Sarah never once stood up for her. Not ever. She remembered rushing to the ER after slicing her hand badly prepping for Mark's birthday bash. Sarah didn't arrive until 2 hours in, not from any real obligation, but because she'd prioritized a salon visit. "Mom, did you really need all that fuss? It's only a handful of sutures." Only a handful of sutures, dismissing her mother's agony as trivial every time. She recalled parting with Robert's engagement band, the sole precious memento from her departed spouse, to loan Sarah $3,000 after Mark got laid off. Sarah vowed repayment within 3 months. That was 2 years past now. She thought of the week she battled a brutal flu, too weak to leave her bed. Sarah never visited. But the instant Eleanor rallied, her daughter rang to request she tend to the houseplants during their lover's escape. and with startling sharpness, she pinpointed the precise instant she'd ceased to be seen as an individual, reduced instead to a mere utility. It occurred at Aunt Helen Vance's memorial service, Robert's sibling. Eleanor had been weeping hard over the profound absence of her sister-in-law, a companion through countless secrets and joys. Sarah drew near, but not for solace. She leaned in to murmur, "Mom, ease up on the tears. Folks might assume you're exaggerating. Anyway, you'll have to swing by the cleaners first thing to grab my gown. I need you there." Not a polite, "would you be able to," but a directive, like addressing staff. Her tea had cooled unnoticed in her grip as Eleanor grappled with 3 decades of minor devastations, petty degradations, instances where she'd stifled her pride for the sake of harmony. The phone buzzed once more. 4 a.m. "Mom, you up? This is keeping me tossing and turning. Mark's livid at me. He's ranting. What about fixing dinner now? His folks already snagged their flights. Don't pull this on me." Sarah's plea carried desperation, but Eleanor felt it no longer, the instinctive desire to bail her out. For the very first time, her child's troubles came across as self-inflicted issues that her child could handle on her own. "Sarah, it's 4 a.m. I realize, but sleep just won't come. Mom, come on, let's think straight. We'll figure something out. Suppose I cover the cost of all the supplies. Suppose I pitch in extra around the kitchen." As though the issue boiled down to extra assistance rather than the core reality that they'd intended to commandeer her home, her schedule, her effort, and her funds without bothering to check if she was okay with it. "Sarah, the fix is straightforward. Host the dinner at your place. But our space is way too cramped. In that case, book a venue. That requires cash. And my effort, my home, and my labor don't count as expenses, right?" Quiet. A prolonged, weighty quiet that carried 3 decades of unvoiced realities. "Mom, I can't figure out what's gotten into you recently. You're acting awfully odd, incredibly self-centered. Self-centered. That label every woman who attempts to draw lines eventually faces. The term wielded to shame women for prioritizing their own desires. Sarah, I'm ending this call, and don't reach out again until you've come up with a plan that leaves me out of it. Mom." Eleanor set the phone down and yanked the cord from the socket. The quiet that ensued was the loveliest she'd experienced in ages. Come morning, Eleanor stirred awake with an unfamiliar sensation in her heart. Initially, she mistook it for worry, yet moments later, she understood it was an emotion absent for many years: liberty. After 3 decades, she no longer needed to ponder Sarah's demands, the crises she must address, the concessions she ought to offer. She selected her outfit with deliberation, opting for her cherished ivory top, the one Sarah forever critiqued, claiming it aged her appearance. She styled her hair while gazing into the mirror, and after years, truly observed her reflection, not hunting for lines or silver strands to hide, but affirming her identity. There was Eleanor Vance, age 72, widowed, a parent, yet foremost an individual. She strode toward the city center with resolute strides. Each street she traversed seemed like a bold affirmation of autonomy. The travel office sat on Main Street, nestled between the drugstore for her prescriptions and the bread shop where she'd purchased loaves daily for 4 decades. "Good morning, madam. What can I assist with?" The clerk at the desk offered a sincere grin, unlike the obligatory one Eleanor had grown adept at spotting from folks who viewed her merely as a relative's elder. "I'd like to arrange a holiday getaway for the holidays. That's fantastic. Any particular spot in mind? Going with loved ones. I'm going solo, and I aim to venture as distant from this place as feasible." The representative, Emily Miller, per her name tag, displayed neither astonishment nor sympathy. She just powered up her laptop and started displaying possibilities. "We've got lovely deals tailored for independent explorers, fond of coastlines, peaks, ancient towns." Eleanor examined the images Emily presented. Pristine shores in Cancun, alpine vistas in Switzerland, stone-paved lanes in Spain. For years, she'd glimpsed such locales only in periodicals skimmed at the physician's office, dismissing them as fantasies for others, for those deemed worthy of joy. "What's your budget looking like?" Emily inquired softly. Eleanor recalled the $15,000 she'd jotted in her journal. $15,000 she'd handed over thoughtlessly, without seeking reciprocity, convinced affection stemmed from self-denial. "I possess $5,000, she stated, and in voicing it, she grasped it marked the first occasion in years she'd discussed her finances, not funds earmarked for Sarah's crises. Emily's smile widened. "With $5,000, we can craft an unforgettable adventure. What do you say to an excursion through Spain and Italy? 3 weeks exploring Madrid, Barcelona, Rome, Florence. Stays in storied lodgings, included dining, English-speaking escorts. It's ideal for anyone seeking to reconnect with their essence, reconnect with her essence." The phrase echoed in Eleanor's core like a chime. When had she last pursued an activity solely for self-renewal? "Count me in. When does it set off?" "There's a flight out on December 20th. You'd be back on January 10th. Right amid the festive season, precisely when Sarah anticipated her slaving over meals for 15 unfamiliar faces in her kitchen. The twist was so exquisite that Eleanor nearly chuckled. "Need time to mull it over?" Emily queried. "No," Eleanor answered firmly. "I'll reserve that journey immediately." While Emily assembled the paperwork, Eleanor experienced a blend of dread and exhilaration. It stood as her boldest choice ever, yet the most logical. At last, she placed her well-being above others' demands. "I'll require your passport duplicate and a card for the initial payment," Emily noted. Eleanor retrieved her passport from her bag. It remained current since she'd updated it the previous year, with the Eleanor had kept her passport renewed in the quiet wish that one day she'd actually put it to use. Sarah had laughed it off when she learned about it. "Why bother renewing your passport, Mom? Where do you even think you'll head off to?" Eleanor pictured Spain and Italy, a grin tugging at her lips. "Yeah, Spain and Italy. That's where I'm headed." Emerging from the travel office, clutching her ticket, she sensed a profound shift in herself. This went beyond the journey itself. It symbolized her choice to prioritize her own life. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Sarah had texted, "Mom, Mark's warning that if you don't scrap this absurd getaway, he'll spill to his entire family how you're being selfish and wrecked Christmas. Is that really your goal?" Eleanor scanned the words twice. The initial read sparked that familiar rush of anxiety and remorse. The follow-up brought a sharp, unyielding focus. Mark, who'd barely held down a job for over 6 months straight. Mark crashing at her place, rent-free for 3 months. Mark, who devoured her groceries, tapped her utilities, her water, her Wi-Fi, and now dared to label her self-centered. She fired back a straightforward response. "Let Mark blab to his relatives all he likes. I'll be across the Atlantic in Europe, out of earshot." The comeback pinged right away. "Europe? Have you lost your mind? How are you affording that?" "With my savings," Eleanor replied, pausing briefly before appending, "the very funds I've poured into supporting you for years." The device lit up with an incoming call. Sarah on the line. Eleanor glanced at the display, noted her daughter's contact, and for the first time ever, opted to ignore it. She powered down the phone and tucked it away in her bag. Dealing with guilt trips and pressure tactics could wait. She had bigger priorities, like picking out some suitcases, or figuring out her wardrobe for a December jaunt through Europe, or finally embracing the existence she'd delayed for 72 years. Striding toward the baggage shop, Eleanor felt her burdens easing with every stride. It was as though she'd hauled around an unseen load of rocks in a rucksack for decades, and now she'd shrugged it free. After 30 years, she finally had a personal thrill to anticipate, one that didn't revolve around pleasing others. Over the following 3 days, Eleanor left her phone silenced, not out of dread for Sarah's rings, but because she'd uncovered a delightful revelation. Quiet. The peace of making choices without needing to defend them. the hush of claiming her right to joy without apologies. She dove into trip prep with the excitement of a girl gearing up for her debut romance. She snagged a sleek burgundy suitcase, chic yet functional. She splurged on outfits she'd always shied away from. A chic taupe trench that lent her an air of elegance, vivid scarves to brighten things up, and stylish yet comfy footwear ideal for strolling ancient European paths. At the city center bookshop, she grabbed a travel guide for Spain and Italy, poring over the layouts for hours and highlighting must-sees. The Prado Museum in Madrid, where she'd finally gaze upon masterpieces she'd revered in print for so long. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, that fantastical basilica pulled from fantasy. The Colosseum in Rome, evoking the dramas of folks from 2,000 years back. The waterways of Venice, where she'd sip espresso as gondolas glided past. For the first time in ages, she was crafting plans just for her own delight, untethered from anyone else's needs. Come the fourth day, she flipped her phone back on. 47 unanswered calls from Sarah, a dozen voicemails, and 23 texts awaited. She went through them all with an unexpected serenity. "Mom, pick up. Mom, this is insane. You're behaving like a kid. Mark insists that unless you back out, we'll need a different plan. Mom, his relatives have their flights booked already. You can't sabotage Christmas for everyone. I'm so let down by you. Never imagined you'd turn this selfish. Mom, come on. I really need you here." The barrage stuck to a predictable script. Fury first, then pleas laced with tears, wrapping up in self-pity. It read like a textbook on mind games, the real tragedy. That playbook had controlled her for years, but no longer. She rang up her confidant, Beatrice B. Walton, the sole friend who'd always delivered straight talk, painful as it might be. "Eleanor, where on earth have you vanished to? Sarah blew up my phone yesterday, frantic about your whereabouts." She was in a state. "B, I've got something to share, and I want your unvarnished take on it." They linked up at their usual spot, the neighborhood cafe they'd frequented weekly for the last decade. At 74, B remained the blunt, no-holds-barred force she'd always been. Widowed the same year as Eleanor, she'd carved a bolder route, mastering driving, diving into art lessons, joining guided tours, even indulging in a few low-key flings. "There's a change in you," B noted right off the bat upon spotting her. "You seem more like your true self again." Eleanor began to recount. She shared the whole story with her. Sarah's phone call, the push to arrange a holiday meal for 15 guests, Eleanor's firm no, and the long-planned getaway to Europe. B paid close attention, staying quiet and offering nods now and then as Eleanor wrapped up. "So, what's your take on it?" Eleanor wondered. "Am I acting selfish here?" B let out a chuckle that rang like tiny bells. "Eleanor, do you realize how long I've hoped you'd finally hash this out in your own mind? What are you getting at? What am I getting at? For years, I've watched Sarah push you around. I've seen you put up with it. And whenever I've tried pointing it out, you've jumped to her defense. But she's my girl, B. But she's facing tough stuff right now, but that's what moms do. Ring any bells?" Eleanor's face grew warm. Yeah, it did. It was the same old lines she'd repeated endlessly to excuse the inexcusable. "B, am I a terrible parent for heading off on that vacation over the holidays? I see you as a woman who's at last figuring out the line between a solid mom and a handy one. A solid mom raises kids to stand on their own, handle their duties, and show thanks. A handy mom handles it all until the kids lose the knack for fending for themselves." B's insight landed like gentle rain on parched earth. Eleanor realized she'd been the handy type, not the solid one. She'd fixed every issue for Sarah until her daughter couldn't tackle her own anymore. She'd poured out endless affection, teaching Sarah to expect it without a second thought. But isn't a mom meant to always be there for her kids? Eleanor, Sarah's 33 now. She's no kid. She's a grown woman, wedded with her own place. If she can't pull off a Christmas spread at that age without you doing the heavy lifting, that's not on you. That's because you never showed her she could manage solo. After Robert passed, I just wanted to cover it all for her, and that worked at 15, but you didn't stop when she hit 20 or 25 or 30. Now she figures it's your role, that you're here to patch up her messes. Eleanor sat quiet, letting her pal's advice sink in. It stung to admit she might have shown love to Sarah the wrong way, that in shielding her from every bump, she'd left her defenseless against life's hits. B, what if she cuts me off for good? Then you'll learn if her feelings run deep or if she just misses the perks you provide. The reality hit hard and harsh. For ages, Eleanor had mixed up being essential with being cherished. She'd thought that if Sarah relied on her, the love would follow. But real affection doesn't demand strings. Real affection isn't tied to being useful. Know the worst part of this mess, B posed, that Sarah barely knows the real you. She only sees the fixer-upper who shells out cash. She hasn't met Eleanor the person, the one with her own hopes who merits dignity. For the first time in days, tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes, not from sorrow, but from a wave of release. At last, someone truly got her. Someone grasped she was bigger than just a parenting role. Head to Europe, B urged, clasping her hand. Go find yourself again, away from playing the eternal caregiver. The following day, Eleanor resolved to face things head on. She couldn't jet off to Europe lugging the burden of a silent feud. One more in-person chat with Sarah was essential to draw clear lines once and for all. She powered up her cell and punched in her daughter's contact. Mom, at last! Where on earth have you been? I've been freaking out. Mark figures you must have bumped your head or something, explaining why you're being so off. There it came. The phony worry chased by a jab painting her as a doddering elder. Mark, naturally, had some diagnosis for her actions. Mark, who'd never once checked in on her health for real. Sarah, get over here to the house. We've got to discuss this. Discuss what? Ditching that silly jaunt and pulling together the holiday feast properly, like grown-ups. Be here at 3 p.m. And by yourself. By myself. Why? Mark wants in on the chat, too. He thinks you need a reality check. A reality check. From Mark, the guy who'd crashed at her place rent-free for 3 months, now schooling her on the facts of life. Sarah, come solo or don't come at all. This isn't up for debate. Sarah stormed in with a scowl like a sulky teen grounded unjustly. She plopped onto the couch, arms folded tight, exuding pure grudge. Mom, enough already. You're carrying on like a brat. Everyone in the family's buzzing about your antics. What family, Sarah? Mark's crew, who've never once included me in plans. The bunch who view me solely as the free cook for their get-togethers. That's not how it is. They value you plenty. When's the last time a single one of them bothered to ask how When was the last occasion they surprised me with a present? Took me out for a meal or even rang just to talk? Sarah parted her lips as if to reply, yet she said nothing. They both recognized the truth. Not once. Sarah, over these 5 years, I've served as the unpaid housekeeper for your husband's relatives, and throughout those 5 years, you've accepted that without complaint. That's not accurate. We consistently show you respect. What exactly, Sarah? You've consistently honored me, taken my emotions into account, and appreciated my efforts. Eleanor rose and retrieved her ledger of expenditures. She set it down on the low table in the living room, flipping to the sheet with the grand total. $15,000. That's the sum I've laid out for you across 5 years. Funds drawn from my retirement funds, my personal reserves, and what I ought to be setting aside for my later years. Sarah stared at the figures, her eyes widening in shock. Mom, we didn't request that you monitor everything. You're correct. You never requested any accounting, nor did you seek my approval before dipping into my funds. You simply presumed they were yours for the taking. But we're relatives. Relatives support one another. Explain to me, Sarah, in what ways have you supported me during these 5 years? Quietness. A stillness so deep that the kitchen wall clock's steady ticks echoed through the room. I'm present whenever you require assistance. When exactly have I required your assistance, Sarah? Provide an instance. Further, quiet. Sarah frantically scanned her recollections for any moment when she had offered rather than accepted. During your illness. That time last year when I had the flu. You failed to visit me a single time. I learned afterward you'd been relaxing at the spa alongside Mark's buddies. Sarah's face flushed crimson. I simply wasn't aware it was so severe. I dispatched 3 texts informing you I was quite ill. You responded with nothing like, "Mom, don't fuss over every minor detail." Now, those aren't minor details, Sarah. They're 3 decades worth of small slights piling up into this dynamic, where I pour out everything and you absorb it all. And the moment I establish limits, suddenly I'm the villain. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Not the sincere sobs of realization over the damage inflicted, but the calculated weeping of someone aware that waterworks have swayed outcomes in the past. Mom, you can't skip Christmas. You can't abandon me to handle this mess solo. Sarah, you brought this mess into existence. You informed Mark's kin that I'd prepare the meal without consulting me. You presumed my home, my schedule, and my finances were yours to command. This isn't an issue for me to resolve, but I have no clue how to manage. I don't know how to prepare a feast for such a crowd. Figure it out. Bring in a caterer. Get takeout. Countless options exist that exclude my involvement. That requires spending cash. And does my labor not demand compensation? Sarah dabbed at her eyes and shifted her approach. Mom, if you proceed like this, Mark will hold it against me deeply. He claims that if his relatives sense exclusion, the blame falls on me. Perhaps it's overdue for Mark to tackle his own familial issues, rather than offloading them onto his mother-in-law. You have no right to criticize my spouse that way. I do, and I shall. Mark is a grown man of 35 who has yet to arrange a single family event because he's relied on women to handle it for him. First his mother, Brenda, and now myself. When will he mature? Sarah leaped from the couch in a rage. I understand now. You're envious because I no longer belong solely to you. You're envious of Mark. The claim was so ridiculous that Eleanor nearly chuckled. Sarah, I'm not envious of Mark. I'm exhausted from acting as his complimentary servant. You know what, Mom? Take your foolish getaway. We'll manage fine without you. And should you return feeling isolated, don't return seeking sympathy. Sarah exited in a huff, banging the door with force that rattled the entire residence. Eleanor remained in the center of her sitting area, drawing steady breaths. For the first time in 3 decades, she had voiced her true thoughts precisely, and the sky hadn't fallen. The ensuing days unfolded in an unusual tranquility. Eleanor anticipated pangs of guilt. She braced for uncertainties, regrets, that inner whisper insisting she'd been overly stern with Sarah. Yet that whisper stayed absent. In its place, she encountered a sensation untouched for ages. Serenity. Each dawn, she awoke free from the dread of anticipating which of Sarah's crises she'd need to address. She savored her morning meal quietly, perusing the full paper from front to back, a ritual untouched for years amid the constant rush to mend some household crisis. She strolled leisurely through the park, noting sights overlooked for so long. The fall hues adorning the branches, senior pears tossing crumbs to the waterfowl, kids frolicking with an abandon she'd long since ceased to notice. One evening, as she sorted her attire for the journey, the chime sounded at her door. She figured it was Sarah, maybe arriving to express regret, or perhaps to launch one final ploy of persuasion. But upon answering, she encountered Brenda, Mark's mom. Brenda, a poised and aloof 68-year-old, had always regarded Eleanor with polite detachment. Over 5 years of acquaintance, their exchanges had seldom stretched beyond 10 minutes. Eleanor, I apologize. It strikes out of nowhere, but we really should discuss this. Sure, Brenda, step right in. Brenda walked through the door and perched on the couch, her back straight like someone bracing for a tough duty. Eleanor, Sarah filled me in on what's happening, on your plan to head out for the holidays. Yeah, I'm off to Spain and Italy. It's a dream I've held on to for ages. I get that you crave some adventure, but isn't the moment all wrong? We've got the whole schedule locked in. My relatives have their flights booked already." Eleanor scanned Brenda's expression. No ill intent colored her tone, yet there lingered that instinctive belief that everyone else's arrangements trumped hers. "Brenda, mind if I pose a question? Over these 5 years, how often has your clan extended an invite my way for anything?" Brenda's eyes flickered in surprise. She obviously hadn't seen that coming. We've always been grateful for you hosting our get-togethers at your place. That's beside the point. I want to know how many times you've pulled me into your world, to your home, a meal out, a party where I'm the visitor, not the one footing the bill and playing host." The quiet dragged on. Brenda stared down at her fingers, visibly uneasy. "Eleanor, we'd figured you loved taking charge of things. You're a whiz in the kitchen and your space feels so inviting. Brenda, across 5 years, I've whipped up meals for your bunch every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. I've shelled out thousands on ingredients, trimmings, presents. I've scrubbed my place top to bottom before and after each event. I've tackled heaps of dirty plates. And through it all, nobody in your family has ever offered a real word of thanks. But Eleanor, we always... Last Christmas at the table, your sister Carol picked apart my turkey, calling it overdone. Your brother-in-law Elias griped about running low on beer. Your son Mark let out a belch right there, then dozed off on my couch as I scrubbed the sink. Does that strike you as gratitude, Brenda? Brenda's cheeks flushed. She knew every detail rang true, though she'd never viewed it through the eyes of the one keeping it all running. Eleanor. It never hit me that way. Naturally, it didn't. Because for 5 years, your lot has treated me like background scenery at these shindigs. The lady who handles the food, the tidying, the costs, but without her own emotions counting for anything. That's not how we saw it. Brenda, level with me. What's my go-to color? What tunes do I dig? Any clue about my pastimes, my goals, my passions beyond feeding your crew? Brenda gazed at her, eyes widening, as the truth sank in. She knew zilch about Eleanor beyond the surface. I guess I never really considered it. You couldn't, since to your family, I'm not an individual. I'm just a role to fill. Brenda stayed quiet for what felt like ages. When she finally broke the silence, her words came out softer, diminished. How do we make this right? We don't. Brenda, a quick sorry won't erase 5 years of being overlooked. And truth is, I don't want you trying to patch it up now. As for the holiday meal, handle it at a diner, your place, Sarah's or wherever, just not here. For 5 years, you've assumed my home was your open venue. This time, figure out fresh options. I admit we've dropped the ball, but isn't going no contact a bit harsh. I'm not severing ties. I'm drawing lines. I'm making it clear I won't serve as your family's free housekeeper anymore. Brenda rose to go, but paused at the threshold and glanced back. Mind if I get personal for a sec? Go ahead. Have you ever truly enjoyed handling all this for us? The words landed like a gut punch for Eleanor, not out of spite, but sheer sincerity, forcing a brutally real reply. No, Brenda. I've been too wrapped up in being helpful to remember what joy even feels like. Brenda gave a slow nod, like a key piece had clicked into place at last. Wishing you that joy on your journey. Once Brenda was gone, Eleanor settled in her kitchen with a steaming mug of tea. For the first time, a member of Mark's side had acknowledged her claim to her own contentment. It was modest progress, yet it mattered. Her eyes drifted to the wall calendar. 5 days till takeoff. 5 days to shed 3 decades of fixing everyone else's messes and embrace a life that's truly hers. The phone buzzed. It was B. Everything okay over there, Eleanor? I believe I'm starting to grasp the gap between being wanted and being valued. And what's that like? Eleanor grinned. A real one, unseen but palpable across the line. It feels like liberty. The morning before departure, Eleanor stirred with a thrill she hadn't known since childhood holidays. Suitcases stood packed with care, papers filed neatly in a dedicated pouch, outfits picked for every scenario she'd pictured. Yet above it all, she carried something rediscovered, long absent, years back: faith. She showered leisurely, selected her beloved outfit, the earthy terracotta shade that Sarah invariably mocked for being overly bold, and applied cosmetics before the mirror, not to appear youthful or conceal lines, but to honor the self she had newly embraced. Each crease on her features narrated a tale, and after so many years, she finally took pride in that narrative. As she savored her final home-brewed coffee for the morning meal, the chime at the entrance sounded. Her pulse quickened, imagining Sarah arriving to reconcile. Yet, upon pulling open the door, she encountered an utter surprise. A distinguished senior man poised gracefully, clutching a bouquet. Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Indeed, that's who I am. I'm David Hawthorne, father to Emily, the agent who arranged your European journey. Eleanor regarded him with bewilderment. What reason could Emily's dad have for visiting her doorstep? Emily shared your story with me, David went on, his smile radiating warmth. She mentioned you're a courageous lady embarking on your inaugural solo voyage to Europe. And me. Well, I'm gearing up for the identical adventure, matching time frame, nearly identical route. Eleanor's face warmed with a blush. I was hoping you might welcome some companionship, he added, not for courtship or any pressure, he assured promptly, spotting her astonished look. Simply to enjoy a shared dinner occasionally, or to capture your photo amid the leaning tower of Pisa. The proposition caught her so off guard, so far from her envisioned solo odyssey, that Eleanor found herself momentarily speechless. For months she had pictured this excursion as her bold assertion of freedom, a phase of deliberate isolation. But here stood David, proposing an unforeseen option: fellowship without strings. I'm unsure how to respond. This came out of nowhere. Emily displayed your photo from the office visit. Not to pry, he clarified swiftly, but I'd mentioned to her my desire to connect with fascinating folks during the travels. She described your grin as blending resilience and melancholy in equal measure. That captivated my interest. For the first time, Eleanor truly observed David. Likely in his mid-70s, his gray locks neatly arranged, eyes gentle framed by stylish spectacles, bearing an air of poise, sans pretension, dressed in a cozy wool pullover in chestnut tones and neatly ironed slacks. He lacked classic allure, yet he exuded serenity and esteem. Might I inquire about your solo travel motives? My spouse passed 2 years ago from cancer. In her final year battling it, I vowed that should she depart first, I wouldn't wallow in self-pity at home. I pledged to venture out, explore destinations, embrace life for us both. His tone grew tender. This marks my debut major outing, bereft of her presence. Eleanor sensed an instant bond with his account. They were both fleeing outdated selves they wished to leave behind. Both sought self-renewal in far-off lands. And what discoveries do you seek in Europe? David grinned. I aim to reclaim the person I was prior to defining myself solely as Maria's partner. I yearn to recall pursuits that brought me joy beyond caregiving roles. Those sentiments echoed deeply within Eleanor's soul, like chimes. They mirrored her own unspoken emotions precisely. David, honesty compels me to say, this journey holds immense significance. It's my first self-indulgent act in 3 decades. I refuse to taint it with amorous presumptions. Oh, Mrs. Eleanor, he interjected softly, nor do I seek entanglements, merely the chance for occasional insightful chats, plus someone to point out pasta remnants in my smile while dining in Rome. Eleanor chuckled heartily, a spontaneous burst that startled even her. Ages had passed since such unbridled mirth, free from concern over its timbre or propriety. You know, David, I believe that kind of companionship appeals to me. For real. Absolutely. Though on one stipulation. Name it. We each cover our individual costs. None of that outdated gallantry obliging the gentleman to foot every bill. I possess my funds and intend to deploy them." David's grin widened. "Mrs. Eleanor, I suspect, will mesh splendidly." He handed over the blooms, crisp white and sunny yellow daisies, unpretentious yet lovely, and departed, not before slipping her his contact card bearing his number and lodging info in Madrid. Once he was gone, Eleanor lingered holding the arrangement, a youthful flutter in her chest. Not sparked by budding romance, it remained premature for such thoughts, but because another had perceived her as more than a dutiful parent or handy elder kin. Another had recognized a compelling individual. She arranged the flowers in a vessel and set them upon the dining surface. Come morning, she'd board the flight to Madrid, and for the first instance in ages, she embraced the uncertainty of what lay ahead. That's precisely the thrill she felt now, a shift from the fear that had once gripped her in such unknowns. The phone buzzed to life. It was Sarah on the line. "Mom, your flight's set for tomorrow, isn't it?" "Yeah, tomorrow morning." A heavy silence stretched out. "Mom, I hate the idea of you going away mad at me." "I'm not heading out in anger, Sarah. I'm stepping away feeling liberated." Could we chat when you return? "We can discuss things once you're prepared to really hear me out." Another beat of quiet. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Sarah, though I'm done mistaking that for being endlessly on call." Once the call ended, Eleanor fixed herself a final meal at home prior to her journey. Nothing fancy, just a basic broth and some greens. She took her time eating, relishing every morsel, fully conscious that by tomorrow evening she'd be enjoying a meal in Madrid. For the first time in 3 decades, she possessed something utterly her own, a horizon brimming with potential. 3 weeks on, Eleanor perched on a cozy balcony in Barcelona, gazing out at the Mediterranean, sipping a café con leche that lived up to her every expectation. The warm Mediterranean sun brushed her skin as she jotted notes in a fresh notebook purchased in Madrid, a habit she'd abandoned since her teenage days. "Day 21 across Europe," she inscribed in neat handwriting. "Today, it hit me. Joy isn't a reward handed out after decades of giving everything. Joy is a daily decision you embrace." David strolled up holding 2 gelatos, lemon for her and chocolate for himself. Over those 3 weeks, they'd forged a relaxed, effortless bond. He made an ideal journey partner, knowledgeable yet unassuming, humorous without overdoing it, considerate without crowding her. They'd explored the Prado Museum side by side, wandered astray in Rome's winding alleys together. They'd chuckled when his attempt at Italian laced with a Spanish twist led him to order footwear paired with cheese instead of pasta with cheese. "Putting your life story to paper?" David inquired, settling into the seat beside her. "Actually, scripting my fresh chapter," Eleanor responded, "the one kicking off at age 72. Her cell had chimed multiple times over the course of the voyage. Texts from Sarah, ranging from frantic pleas to angry outbursts to subtle ploys. In the initial days, she'd scanned them all, each one stirring a twinge of remorse. But bit by bit, her outlook had evolved. Sarah's issues weren't crises demanding her immediate fixes anymore. They were growth opportunities for Sarah to navigate solo. The most recent note she'd opened, arriving 2 days prior, stood apart. "Mom, we ended up scrapping Christmas dinner. Mark and I clashed hard over who'd handle it all. Ultimately, we admitted we weren't up for something that massive. His folks are let down by us, not by you. I'm starting to grasp a bit why you took off. Hope things are going great for you." Eleanor had pored over those words thrice. No rush of victory or glee washed over her, just a serene assurance that her choice had been sound. Sarah was finally grasping, maybe for the first time as an adult, that choices carry repercussions and that a rescuer wouldn't always swoop in. "What's on your mind?" David prompted, catching the faraway look in her eyes. "For 70 years, I figured my value as a human hinged on my usefulness to everyone around me. I thought affection was something you proved by being irreplaceable. These days, I've learned real affection doesn't demand proof. It's simply there, or it's not. And those who care deeply won't vanish the moment you stop serving a purpose. David gave a thoughtful nod. In their 3 weeks together, they'd delved into plenty of profound talks. He'd opened up about the stretch he'd devoted to tending Maria, how he'd slowly erased his own sense of self in the quest to be the flawless spouse. She'd shared her tale of 3 decades as the ideal parent, only to discover that ideal had rendered her personally unseen. You know the oddest part, Eleanor mused. On this whole adventure, I haven't whipped up a dish for another soul, and there's zero longing for it. I figured I'd pine for that role, but nope. What do you find yourself missing? The me from before I turned into just a caregiving machine, the lady who dove into books for fun, who held strong views on films, who fantasized about far-off trips. That version slumbered for 30 years, but she never truly faded. The sun dipped toward the Mediterranean horizon, streaking the heavens in hues beyond description. The next day marked her final one in Europe before flying back. Yet, home no longer evoked a cage. It whispered of a space where she could keep nurturing the self she'd unearthed abroad. David, mind if I share a secret? Go ahead. Back when I was young, pre-marriage, I dreamed of teaching art, kept it hidden since it felt too frivolous. Then came the wedding, Sarah's arrival, Robert's passing, excuses always piled up to shelve it. But now, at 72, it doesn't seem too late to chase what I truly yearn to become. David grinned. Funny you mention that. I've got a secret of my own. I always. Eleanor had always dreamed of picking up the piano. Maria often insisted they were past the age for acquiring fresh skills. What's your next move? I'm considering getting a keyboard. They shared a chuckle. The kind of mirth shared by folks who realize that existence doesn't wrap up at 70, that maybe, in an odd twist, it's only kicking off. That evening, Eleanor lay restless in her Barcelona hotel, gazing at the city's twinkling glow. The following morning, she'd head back, though not the identical individual who'd departed. She'd come home as Eleanor Vance, free from the roles of Sarah's mom or Mark's old housekeeper. She'd arrive as a lady who'd grasped that refusing requests wasn't self-centered. It was essential for enduring. Her cell buzzed. A text from B. How's the updated Eleanor faring? She typed back. The updated Eleanor is realizing it's never too soon or late to launch a fresh chapter. On the flight home the next day, as Europe faded under the wing, Eleanor jotted in her notebook, "Right now, I require no approval to exist. Right now, I recognize that dignity isn't pleaded for, it's claimed. Right now, I see that liberty isn't about pursuing every whim, but avoiding what you resent. And come tomorrow, touching down back home, I'll kick off the remaining chapters of my story." She shut the notebook and reclined. For the first time at 72, tomorrow was wholly hers. It wasn't payback, it was release. And it mirrored soaring through the air. 6 months post my European trip, I'm perched in my fresh creative space, fingers smudged with oil paints and spirit unburdened like it hasn't been in ages. Who'd have guessed at 73 I'd be experimenting with hues and uncovering a knack for capturing scenery on canvas? The home has transformed. It's ceased being a spot for frantic summons or surprise drop-ins demanding help. It's become my haven, a realm where items sit as I choose, and choices are all mine. The quiet doesn't unsettle anymore. It welcomes me warmly. Sarah and I converse these days, but in a new vein. Initially, it was tough. Tears flowed, blame flew, finger-pointing abounded, yet a shift occurred once I quit justifying and just upheld my limits. She needed to view me as an individual, not a utility. She's still adjusting, yet there's headway. She inquires about my well-being prior to unloading her woes. She suggests meals out without assuming I'll cover costs. These minor shifts matter greatly. As for Mark, he's unchanged, but he's off my plate. Sarah's gradually grasping that her spouse's issues fall to him, not his mother-in-law. It's been a pricey education for her, yet vital. David stops by weekly. We sip herbal brew, exchange tales from our lessons. He truly purchased that instrument and is practicing tunes from the store. Occasionally, we catch films as pals savoring time together sans heavy demands. I'm unsure if it'll evolve further, and for once, that ambiguity charms rather than worries me. I've come to see that cherishing oneself isn't egotism. It's vital for inner strength. For so long, I equated giving up everything with affection, believing greater offerings meant greater returns. Now I get that genuine bonds thrive when mutual regard allows personal space. My savings have swelled. Ceasing to serve as the family ATM astonishingly preserves funds. I've channeled some into home updates, art sessions, modest indulgences once deemed extravagant, regular spa treatments, fresh reads, blooms on my counter, bits that turn daily life into a toast to vitality. The biggest revelation: I wasn't unseen, I just overlooked myself. Once I started honoring my worth, so did those around me. Neighbors nod with fresh warmth. The grocer inquires about my artwork. The library staff sets aside volumes on creativity just for me. I've discovered that drawing lines doesn't shatter ties. It refines them or severs the weak ones, and either result serves well. Stronger connections turn real and deep. Frayed ones likely deserved fading. Certain days bring melancholy for time squandered, for the self I was who deemed herself vital when she was merely replaceable. But that melancholy no longer stalls me. I welcome it, hold it close, then release. History shaped me. Now the now is mine. I glance at these hands scripting words, hands that prepared countless dinners for those who presumed them, hands that tidied chaos not theirs, hands that funded strangers' ambitions. Today, these hands craft visions, pen personal reflections, cheer solo victories. The figure who flew to Madrid was a weary ex-maid who'd misplaced her identity. The one who came back is Eleanor Vance, creator, explorer, pal, a fully realized individual who no longer requires validation from others to affirm her worth. Each day I rise without a clear idea of what's ahead. Yet these days, that unpredictability thrills me rather than frightens me. Since I've grasped the key insight, I merit crafting my own narrative, and it's always possible to revise the conclusion. Loved my tale. Show your support with a super thanks. It'll help me produce additional pieces just like this. Appreciate it beforehand. And you. How would you handle things if you were in her position? I'm eager for your input, so share it below in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Also, tell me if you've come across this narrative before, craving more real-life accounts like this one. Hit that like button and join my channel subscription. Plenty more are in store for you. Warm embraces and catch you soon.